Good afternoon and welcome to another inReach Field Experience webinar. Today we're going to be talking about everything you need to know about SOS. My name is Chip Noble. I'm the product manager here at Garmin, and being the product manager for inReach, I am a safety conscious planner. I am very excited to be joined today by Emily Thompson. She is our special projects leader with Garmin. Welcome, Emily. So glad to have you with us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Very good. So as I said at the beginning, today's topic is SOS, everything you could hope to know about SOS. We are going to cover all of these topics today. We're going to talk about how to use your inReach device for an SOS. Emily is going to talk with us about the Garmin International Emergency Response Coordination Center. We are going to look at some inReach devices and see how to trigger an SOS. We're going to talk about, Emily's going to talk with us about what happens during an SOS. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the top 10 most asked SOS questions. And that's all before we get to the great questions that I know all of you are going to enter into the chat. We'll cover those as well. So a lot to cover. You see a nice photo here from our 5,000th inReach SOS, and you can learn about that, read about it on our Garmin blog. And we'll have more about the blog at the end. So before we jump into the specifics of SOS, we did want to talk a little bit about the benefits of using an inReach device for an SOS. And really, and the reason that we have Emily joining us here today, one of the most important benefits of using an inReach device for SOS is all about that incident management that takes place through the Garmin IERCC. And that is a great thing because there is a 24/7 staffed group of professionals there to help in case you have an emergency. Now that ability to send that message, that's all two-way communication. That makes it even better. That means not only can you declare the emergency and send your SOS message, but you can receive a response from Emily's team. And we talk a lot about the hope that that provides to a person who is in the middle of a very stressful situation. Could be medical emergency. There are all kinds of different factors, but the fact that Emily's team responds, you know that a real person is there, they're taking care of you, they're providing you with updates. That's a real powerful part of our system. The inReach device uses the Iridium satellite network that has 100% global coverage. The system uses tracking during the SOS. So if you are, for example, in a boat and you've had a mechanical issue and you're drifting, your device tracks at a 10-minute interval, shares your location during the SOS. And another piece that's important when we talk about search and rescue and teams being, dispatched into the field to go and help people. Should something change with your emergency and you no longer need assistance, you can cancel that SOS and that information gets passed along to search and rescue as well. There are some notes here at the bottom. I notice the system does use that Iridium satellite network. That does mean you have to have an active satellite subscription for these devices to work. That covers all of the capabilities, the SOS capabilities, sending and receiving messages, tracking, that sort of thing. So definitely we're going to talk about important things before you go out on your trip, and one of those is to make sure that you have an active satellite subscription, that you haven't suspended your device for the off season. And the last piece is to remember that around the world there are different countries with different regulations around satellite communication devices. You want to make sure if you're traveling someplace new for a bucket list adventure, double check what the regulations might be. We don't want anyone to get in trouble for having a satellite communication device in a location where they're not, where they're prohibited. So a little bit of the background on inReach before we get started. Let me get that, there we go. So Emily, if you don't mind, could you share a little bit about the Garmin IERCC with our listeners?
Yeah, of course. So the Garmin IERCC, which is the Garmin International Emergency Response Coordination Center, we are the world leader in emergency response solutions. And with this, we've coordinated over 13,000 emergency responses in 200 different countries and territories. So when we get asked that question, where do you work? Where can you handle things? Where can you handle calls? it's anywhere in the world. Which means we also have to support over 200 languages and dialects. And the last thing is, if you may have tuned in last summer when we did this webinar, we were the GEO's IERCC, but as of about 6 months ago, we are now the Garmin IERCC. So we are happy to be a part of the team.
Very good. It always surprises me when I think about the global use of the system and the number of countries, and particularly the number of languages that are supported in order to, administer a rescue. So thank you for sharing that with us. So from here, we're going to look at how you trigger an SOS with the device. And really, if you think about it, Emily and I are here to talk because between the two of us, we cover really the full ecosystem. So from myself, coming from the device side, we're going to look at the inReach devices and how they trigger the SOS. And then Emily's going to talk about what happens once that SOS has been triggered and how her team will interact with all of our users when they're out there. Before we get started, though, let's look at some of the important things to do before you leave on your trip. And that's because, as I mentioned before, each of these devices does require an active satellite subscription. There are also some settings that we want to make sure that everyone gets configured properly around emergency contacts and things like that. So the first piece, confirming that your inReach device has an active satellite subscription. We do that by going into the Explore site and going to the account section. And what you see is under plans and devices, you see your subscription, and that tells you that you are active. After you confirm that you have an active satellite subscription for your SOS and tracking and messaging, then we want you to go into accounts and review your emergency contacts. And these contacts are the people that Emily's team would reach out to. Emily, can you share some details about how that works from your side?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it is very important that you make sure to keep those emergency contacts updated, because the IERCC is going to reach out to them in the event you do activate an SOS from there. So you want to make sure you have those contacts up to date, and it's even better if they know what you're out doing, because that's what we're looking for when we try to call them, just to try to get more details about your itinerary, who you're with, your whereabouts, and so on.
That's right. And we do a webinar during the year where we talk about best practices. And one of the things we describe is planning your adventure and then making sure you stick to that plan. And one of those steps is communicating the plan to your friends and family, particularly your emergency contacts if you have a big bucket list trip coming up. And that's helpful because when Emily's team reaches out to the emergency contacts that you were careful to keep updated, then they may have some additional details. I know, Emily, you've shared with me in the past how really your job, your team's job, is to provide as much information from as many different sources as you can to that search and rescue team that is going into the backcountry to try and help someone. So definitely keep those emergency contacts up to date and keep your emergency contacts informed when you're going on a big trip. Another piece, another one of those tools that Emily's team can take advantage of is the emergency notes. I talk about this one in particular because for myself, I have type O negative blood. So if I have a medical emergency in the backcountry, I want to make sure that Emily's team can communicate to search and rescue that they may need to bring special supplies with them if they're going to come and help. But that kind of piece. Emily, anything you would add around emergency notes and how your team uses those?
Yeah, I would just say definitely if you can include any notes about what you're going to be out doing, your trip, the dates you're going to be there, who you're with, the more information, the better, because like we said, we're going to be passing all this information on to emergency services. So in the event, say your emergency contacts don't answer, at least we'll have that little bit of information from your emergency notes, especially if you're not able to respond via the inReach device for whatever reason. So.
That's right, and you actually triggered a memory. I know some of our ambassadors even will put specific instructions for the search and rescue team. If an emergency happens, contact these specific organizations because they know a little more about what their action plan is if they have an emergency. So emergency notes are a very useful tool. And in general, keeping all of your account information updated before you even start your trip. That's a really important thing to do to help Emily's team and to help search and rescue should they need to provide assistance. So from here, now we jump into how to actually trigger an SOS and cancel an SOS with your inReach device. And we're looking here at 3 of our popular devices. We have the inReach Explorer Plus on the top row. We have the inReach Mini and the GPS Map 66i. There are other inReach devices that we don't show here, but they all have a similar process, whether you're talking about the Montana 700, 750i series, or the Dog Track and Train Alpha 200. Those are also inReach devices with the ability to declare an SOS. They use a similar process, and really to trigger an SOS, it is about opening the physical door on the side of the device. You see on the right side, each of them have a little orange door that you open, and there's an SOS button inside. You press and hold that SOS button, and you're waiting for the SOS countdown. If you take anything away from this part of the presentation, it's that you must open the door and press and hold the SOS button until the countdown timer starts. Once you've accomplished that, once that countdown timer starts, you have 20 seconds to cancel it if you were testing the button, if you're exploring, trying to see what it does, or if something changes in the emergency. You can cancel within 20 seconds. If you don't, it's going to initiate an SOS with Emily's team. And you don't really have to do anything else after that. We encourage people to reply, because when the IERCC receives it, they're going to respond with a message. Is it a medical emergency, an equipment failure, something like that? And it's great if you can provide additional detail. Again, as we said before, Emily's team is gathering as much information as they can to distribute to search and rescue. The note here is if for some reason you're not able to respond, we want certainly to make sure our listeners understand the team will still move forward and initiate that rescue. But there's some additional information that you could share. Anything you'd add there, Emily, about that ability to message back and forth with your team?
Yeah, it is very important if you can do so, because like I said, the more information that we can gather about the current situation is great. But if you're unable to, keep in mind, like, it's completely okay. We don't know which situation is out there, but keep in mind, we will keep you updated on the rescue process. That way, if you're not able to respond, you still know that help is coming and you know when they're going to be there and so on.
The last note here is around the ability to cancel the SOS, and I mentioned that earlier. One of the benefits of the system, if something's changed on your end, sometimes it's just that help has arrived, but maybe the situation has changed and you no longer need assistance. There's a team that's working their way towards you. If you let the IERCC know that there's been a change, if you cancel the SOS, then that information can be communicated to the people who are working their way into the backcountry, and you can let them know things have changed with that cancel. We do have detailed slides at the end of the presentation. We won't spend as much time there. You can download the slide deck, as I mentioned, but that will cover the details on how to trigger and cancel an SOS with each of these devices and with some devices that we're going to look at in a second. From here, really, when you think about the inReach system, there is the device that we just looked at, the Explorer Plus, the the Mini, and the 66i. There are also companion apps for each of these devices. We have the EARTHMATE app and the Explorer app. We're going to look at the EARTHMATE app first. For those of you out there that might not be using the EARTHMATE app because you have one of the newer devices like the GPS Map 66i, the Montana, the Alpha, the EARTHMATE app is the app we had when with our older DeLorme devices, or the Explorer Plus, SE Plus, and as you see here, the Mini. Very similar functionality, similar process. We're just going to look specifically at the SOS capability. You choose SOS from the menu in the EARTHMATE app. You slide that little SOS button on the screen, and that will bring up a message telling you that you are about to contact GEOS. And when you initiate, you see that same 20-second countdown timer. After the 20-second countdown timer completes, you have initiated a message, and now you have the confirmation that you have sent to to the IERCC. They can respond, and as we mentioned, if you need to, you can cancel the SOS. But the idea that you could declare from the device, in fact, most people do. It's very convenient to open the SOS door and press and hold that button, and then you're into it. But the EARTHMATE app and the Explorer app, those are very convenient for text messaging. So remember that you can use both systems, and we'll see that even a paired Garmin device in a second. But both of those input mechanisms for texting back and forth with the team, with keeping everyone up to date. And a note here just to remember, the EARTHMATE app is a companion to an inReach device. You can't declare an SOS from the app by itself if you don't have the inReach device with you. So keep that in mind. It's a companion for inReach. Here we see a similar set of slides around the Explore app. This is the companion for the, as I mentioned, GPS Map 60 series. The 86 is a marine device, a little bit larger than the 66i. It floats, it has marine charts, but same general form factor as this GPS Map 60 series. The Montana and the Alpha. From the Explore app, you select the SOS from the menu, slide the SOS button, you see the SOS countdown timer. A default message is sent to the IERCC along with a confirmation to your device, and then you are into the messaging back and forth to discuss details of the situation. There is a cancel option after the situation has been resolved or the situation changes. And as I said before, the Explore app is a companion to the compatible inReach device, and you need to have that device with you to declare an SOS. The third part of the system, we talked about the inReach device itself, we talked about the companion app. You can also pair another Garmin device to your inReach. And so you see here along the bottom some pictures. We have the Garmin Overlander, we have an Edge Cycle computer, we have a Garmin chart plotter, the Phoenix or the Instinct watch, and a large list of other watches. And then the off-road Zumo here in the end. But all of these devices can be paired with an inReach device, like an inReach Mini. And that allows you to do things like trigger or cancel your SOS, or send and receive messages and see them on these interfaces. You can get a full list of all the different compatible devices at the Garmin.com website. We also have a lot of information on how to pair and how to use the products. If you need more detail, you can go to our support.garmin.com site, and we will have some detailed slides at the end on how to trigger and cancel SOS with these devices. Phew, that was a lot. Now I'm gonna, Emily, if you don't mind, if you could talk through what, now that we've declared the SOS from kind of the device side of things, talk to us a little bit about what happens on with your team on the IERCC side of things.
Yeah, so this is something we get asked all the time. You know, what actually happens when you press that SOS? Where does it go? Who gets it? Of course, the IERCC gets it. And whenever you press that SOS button, it sends your location, your profile information, everything to the IERCC. So that also includes those emergency notes and those emergency contacts that we talked about before. And so with that, the IERCC is plotting your location and trying to determine the agency that they're going to need to contact, and also sending an initial message to your inReach device requesting the nature of the emergency, just in hopes that we could try to get some information to pass on to emergency services. But also keep in mind, we don't wait for your response. We go ahead and start notifying emergency services of the SOS, giving them your latitude and longitude, and your profile information, if they want your emergency contacts, so on and so on. And any information that you're able to provide us with, we will pass on to the agency. There are many instances where if they say you do respond and say there's a medical emergency, the agency is already going to have a list of questions that they're going to want the IERCC to send you. So we'll do that on their behalf, and we're basically the middleman. We give the information back and forth, but there are instances where the SAR coordinator or the agency or whoever it may be would want to speak with the device directly. And this is also something that we are able to do. So if that is the case, you would just get a message from the IERCC asking that you send a message to a phone number or an email address, and you would just be able to click on that phone number or email address and create a new message and just message with them directly. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's very good. That last feature, we're gonna look at what that exactly looks like in one of the questions at the end. That's one of the features I like about the system we've put together.
And then with that, we are also notifying your emergency contacts, like I said before. So we are trying to contact them to get all the information that we, about your whereabouts, and any information that we get from them, we are going to provide to emergency services. And in the next slide. And then we will continue any information that we get from your emergency contacts, we're going to pass on to emergency services. But we also stay in contact with, the agency emergency contacts, as well as the device user, and kind of keeping everybody up to date on what's going on, on the rescue process and so on. And so, and that's really basically it. We stay in contact with everybody until we receive confirmation that the response is complete. So.
Very good. Thank you. I know this, as you said, this is probably the most important part of our presentation. People always wonder, you can use the device, you can explore and learn the functionality, but until you've actually had this kind of an explanation of what happens after the SOS button is pressed, what is the IERCC doing behind the scenes, reaching out to your contacts, interacting with you as the device user, tying all of that together with the search and rescue organization that's actually in the area where you are and are going to be coming to you. And I think it's such an important part of it that you guys are there through the entire thing. You are kind of the hub for all the information. So thank you for sharing those details with us. We are going to look now, so some best practices during an SOS. One of the things that we talk about with people is how to position the device. And having done this presentation a few times, we will get some really good questions at the end for more detail, but we certainly want to make sure people keep the device in an elevated position with a clear view of the sky. And I talk about a couple of scenarios. One is the person who's out hiking. We like to see that on a backpack, on a shoulder strap, or in the pouch that's up on the top of your backpack, or maybe clipped to a MOLLE loop on the back of the pack, but in a way so that the antenna, you notice in the picture here, that helical antenna at the top of the device, you want to make sure that stays pointed up towards the sky and not obstructed by your body because you put it down on your hip, but up high on your shoulder. And if you put it in the pack in the back, make sure that you've somehow attached it so that it doesn't jostle its way around while you're hiking and get turned upside down, so that that antenna is pointing down at the ground. Keep that device oriented the right way and you'll have a very successful time using the device for messaging. Once you have initiated an SOS, we do talk about, we've covered this already, to make sure we say that take advantage of the two-way text messaging. As Emily pointed out, if you can provide her team more detail, then she can pass that detail along to search and rescue. So that's an important best practice to remember. And the note, if for some reason you can't respond, medical emergency, or just the stress of dealing with whatever it is you have to deal with during that emergency, don't worry. The IERCC certainly moves forward with initiating that response. The last best practice that we talk about is for people to stay in the location where they are. This is beyond using a satellite communication device. General best practice, if you're lost in the woods or if you're having an emergency, stay put if you can. Unless you're instructed by Emily's team to move to a new location, unless you have no choice because of the environment, danger, some reason that you had to move, the device is tracking your location. Your location was included in your initial SOS message. That's the location that the team passes to search and rescue. They certainly will pass any updates as they come in, but in general, the best practice is to stay at the location where you were if you're able. And the note there, the tracking is automatically enabled during an SOS. So from here, we having talked with lots of customers over the years and helped lots of people with the system, we have a set of questions that we'd like to answer first with some detail, and then we'll as I said, we'll open it up to questions that people are typing in as we speak. The first question that we get is, when can I trigger an SOS? And this is a common question. It's a good one. And it's challenging because a lot of it depends on people using their best judgment as to when to trigger an SOS. We talk about how, as you see here, there's no one size fits all for this. I've heard lots of people talk on this topic over the years. And one of the best ways that I've heard it described is, as long as you are confident that you know the outcome of the situation, then you should probably try to resolve things on your own. But as soon as you hit that point where you're uncertain about the outcome, that's the right time to reach out for help, to reach out to the IERCC. Emily, jump in. You've shared some details about when the right time is that I think are very helpful for our listeners.
Yeah, so we would much rather you go ahead and activate sooner rather than later. We just don't want the situation to get worse because you never know how long the response is going to take. You know, responses can be quick, but then there's times where the weather may be bad, and so that's going to delay them, or, you know, they may not have the available resources at the time. So you just have to keep that in mind, that don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until it becomes a severe emergency. You are welcome to, you can activate that SOS and communicate with us. Let us know the situation. And we can go ahead and contact local emergency services, maybe get some advice, because obviously local emergency services is going to know better than we do about the area. So we'll go ahead and communicate back and forth and just kind of keep an eye on your situation, but instead of waiting until the last minute. So
yeah, I like that piece of advice to reach out sooner. And it's, you know, hearing you describe it, you realize you take a situation that might be able to be resolved in the daylight hours, and if you wait too long, you've pushed it into something that, you know, brings nightfall, brings darkness into the equation, or perhaps changing weather conditions, or worsening effects of whatever the injury might be. So yes, definitely reach out. And then the next piece here really ties in the fact that your team has a variety of ways to respond. It's not always that they're going to send a helicopter to your location. The local area search and rescue may dispatch a team of volunteer hikers to come in and help you find your way out of the situation, or provide assistance. But sometimes I think people worry that it's always the helicopter that's coming. There's a range of potential responses, and your team is equipped to make the best decisions for that.
Mind, actually, I was going to mention, you know, you mentioned being lost earlier. Plenty of people activate all the time for being lost, because if you end up getting lost, that could turn into a potential emergency situation. And so, like I said before, there are times where we've gotten them and then we just kind of walk them through, like while we're communicating with emergency services. And then there's times where a SART coordinator will want to message them directly and kind of give them directions as to how to get back to a trail or how to get out or something like that. So that's another situation where, yes, definitely activate in that situation instead of waiting until it gets worse.
Yeah. Last note is that you can message with the IERCC and other contacts. So one of the things Emily's team does is reach out to emergency contacts. We see plenty of people who use the device for the emergency, but also for we'd call it a casual message to their friends or family to let them know some details about what's happening. I know if I ever had an emergency, I probably would send a message to my loved ones telling them, here's some details about what's happening. Our last note is for people, just as a reminder. Certainly inReach technology is powerful. It allows people to be connected and have the ability to reach out if they have an emergency, but we want people to remember to recreate responsibly and be mindful about the people that might have to come out and offer assistance. They will encounter the same conditions. So if you get into the backcountry and you experience severe weather conditions, you know, look ahead, plan, make sure that you are being responsible with the terrain that you're traveling in, with your own skill set, that sort of thing, because someone will have to come in and help you if you declare an SOS. So just we always want to remind people to be responsible with their planning. And then the last note we've covered on most of these slides. Remember that you need to have an active inReach satellite subscription. Without it, you can't trigger an SOS. So an important detail. Second question, next question that we get quite often, who can I trigger an SOS for? And when we talk to people, we definitely want to make sure they understand it's not just for yourself. You can trigger it for yourself or someone else. And that could be someone that is in your party. It could be someone in a third party, someone that you come along, a Good Samaritan act, you come across someone who's injured themselves on the trail, you're welcome. As you see in this picture, you could go to our blog and read about our 6,000th inReach SOS, which was for an inReach user who helped a stranger along the trail. So very nice story there. And in fact, we see many SOS activations that are triggered for third parties. And note, if someone's borrowing your device, they can also use it. It doesn't have to be for the device owner or the device owner using it. You can, someone can borrow your device. And we've added a tip to our slides from our previous presentation. If you are the device owner and you're going out on a trip with people, it is in your best interest to make sure that you first inform people that you have a satellite communication device in your gear bag. And then we would encourage you to show them the basics of how to use it. And we covered those in this presentation. It is as simple as, here's the SOS button on the side of the device. You open it and you press and hold the button, and I can't hear people respond, but hopefully everyone's yelling. You press and hold the button until you see the SOS countdown timer. That's the critical piece. We don't want someone to open the door and tap the SOS button and think that that started it. If you don't see the countdown timer, it hasn't initiated yet. But that could be someone using the device to help you because you have been injured on the hike. And if you download this slide deck and you choose that SOS incident in Alaska, that link, you can read about how that actually helped someone. So definitely show someone how to use the device before you head out. It's a good part of preparing your team, not just having the tool for yourself. The next question, what information does the Garmin IERCC see during an SOS? And Emily, would you like to talk our listeners through what information your team has access to?
Yeah, of course. So like I mentioned before, we do get all of your emergency contact information and those emergency notes. But another big question that we get all the time is the location. Yes, we do get the initial position, but we also continue to receive positions while you're in SOS mode. And so that's why it's very important to leave it in SOS mode until you've received the assistance that you need. Because if you just activate it and cancel it, there's a good chance that emergency services may not want to go out, especially if it's right away. So leave it in SOS mode so that we can, continue the communication with you. We can continue getting your location information. Because while you're in that SOS mode, for the first 10 minutes, we're actually getting a new position every minute. And then after that, it switches to every 10 minutes if you're moving, and then every 30 minutes if you're stationary. So we are continuing to get that new location. So if you are moving, we will know, and we're monitoring it, and we will update emergency services. But as Chip mentioned before, stay in your location if you're able to, unless you're advised otherwise. And also another note is that if your device battery is running low, then the IERCC does relay this to the responding agency. And so don't worry about it. We will know because it'll just stop sending new positions without a cancel, so.
That's right. That last note I think is interesting. It's not just the text that you type in. There's a lot of extra detail that gets sent in a message. Your battery life, your location, elevation, their speed. There's all kinds of really useful data that gets sent with an inReach message. So powerful communication tool. The next question, can I message during an SOS? And the answer is yes. And we've actually talked about this a bit. You can message with the Garmin IERCC, certainly during an SOS. You can also message with other contacts. On top of that, this is what Emily mentioned earlier in the slides, the presentation, that you may find that her team wants to connect you with a first responder so that you can message directly with them. And one of the features that we've built into the system is that Emily's team can send you a phone number. And when she sends a message that says, please contact John, here's the number, we will recognize there's a number in there. We give you a simple dialogue. You just arrow up to select it, and that will start the conversation thread with that particular member of the search and rescue. So some nice little tools that we've built into the system to try and speed up the process for that communication to take place. The next question is, who responds to a rescue and how long does it take? And really this question is for you, Emily, because I know your team has that huge global database of first responders. Would you like to share more with our listeners?
Yeah, of course. Two very good questions that we do get very frequently. And the first one is, who responds to a rescue? And I have to keep in mind, since the IERCC is we coordinate international rescues, we do have, we maintain a global database of local first responders. And so when an SOS is triggered, like I told you before, we do plot your location and we know the agency that we're going to need to contact already. And so, and then that responding organization is the best way to, they're going to determine the best way to conduct the rescue. So basically, they're going to follow their standard operating procedure as to how to handle the incident. And then the other question is, how long does it take? Which gets asked a lot, and people need to keep in mind that the amount of time it takes for a rescue, it varies, because you never know if you're going to run into bad weather, the amount of resources that are available. It's going to depend on the remoteness of your location, all types of the severity of the injuries, and so on. So there really is no solid answer to that question for how long does it take, because it just varies. It could be quick, it could take longer. You never know. So
I think that's an important detail for our listeners to hear and really to absorb. If I've taken 2 days to backpack into the backcountry and I have an emergency, I should expect, depending on the severity, but even if it's so severe that it's a helicopter rescue, I'm still in a very remote location. People need to be notified, and they have to travel to the location to begin the rescue. But now imagine if it's found that they're going to actually send a team in on foot to help me, that I have to keep those factors in mind. It's not an instantaneous process, and that's, again, to tie it back to why the two-way communication is so important. Though the person having the emergency will get those updates from your team. They'll know how long it's going to take for emergency services to arrive, and they'll also be getting regular updates from your team to keep them apprised of any changes in the situation, weather changes, timing, and all those pieces. So really important to keep that in the back of everyone's minds as they think about how long it might take for rescue to arrive.
But we'll definitely do our best to keep you updated and to let you know, when they plan to arrive and so on.
Yeah, definitely. The next question is a popular one. What does a rescue cost? This is an equally challenging question because the response is really that it varies country by country, state by state, even county by county. And so we talk to people about making sure, as I said in the beginning, check with the local authorities in the area before you travel. We want to make sure people are, if you're unsure, you should find that out before you get into the backcountry. If there is a fee that's incurred, it would be charged to the individual to whom the SOS was triggered, for whom it was triggered, not the device owner necessarily, perhaps the third party injury that you came across on the trail, that sort of thing. So
yeah, that actually is a question we do get asked a lot as well. Does it cost to activate the SOS, or especially if I get activated for somebody else, am I going to get charged? And the answer, you're not going to get charged just for pressing the SOS. If any fees or expenses are incurred for the rescue, it's going to be for that person that it was activated for.
What does an SOS coverage include? So for anyone that has an inReach device and they have paid for their subscription, that covers any of the interaction with the Garmin IERCC. That's the cost to declare the SOS, that message, including any tracking messages that are sent back and forth, again, with the Garmin IERCC. That's all included in all of our plans, whether you're a safety plan user, or recreation plan, or an expedition plan with unlimited messaging. There are some things that the SOS coverage does not cover, and that is additional costs possibly associated with the rescue, or those casual communication messages that I talked about. If you're sending lots of updates to your friends and family, those are billed as regular messages. A question that we receive a fair amount: how do I test that my inReach device is working? We have created a couple of features to make this easier for people to see if they have an active subscription. The test feature is on each of these devices, and the way that the test feature works is you go outside with a clear view of the sky, go to the test feature on the in the menu for each of the devices, and what it does is it sends a test message to the Iridium satellite network. The satellite receives it, it responds to your device with a confirmation that it has received it, and then when your device gets that confirmation message, it shows you a nice, warm, encouraging green check mark that lets you know all is well. And we refer to that as a round trip test because you sent a message, the satellite received it, and it responded with a reply, and your device received that reply. You know that your subscription is active and you're ready to go on your hike. That's nice because you may be starting your trip very early and a friend or family member might not be awake to respond to a different kind of test message. You also might be outside of cell phone range, so you might not be able to send a message to yourself to test it. So using that test feature is important. You get 5 free test messages per month. They're included in all the plans. Again, I encourage you to run those tests. Another kind of test is really done with your team. Emily, can you talk to us a little bit about how to trigger a test for SOS?
Yeah, so there are a lot of people that want to actually see it and kind of feel what it's like to press it without, us sending emergency services. So of course you can schedule a time to test out the SOS feature with us. You can do so by scheduling it through the Garmin IERCC. We have a form that you can fill out that we can send you, or you can go to our website, and at the bottom of the website, it talks about you can click on device testing or schedule a test, and it'll take you to the website just kind of explaining how to go about setting up this test, and it gives you the information that you need to fill out and submit to the IERCC for approval. But I do want to make a note that if you are planning to do this, to schedule a test, we just ask that you try to give us at least 72 hours notice, because there are plenty of people where they message last minute, be like, hey, I want to send this test. They send it into our email and just do it. So we'd rather know about it ahead of time so that we don't think it's a real, SOS and start coordinating the response.
That's right. That's part of the proper planning of your adventure, to schedule your SOS test accordingly. Mm-hmm. Very good. Thank you. Mm-hmm. The next section is that detailed steps for triggering and canceling an SOS. Emily and I want to save as much time for your questions, so I'm going to move quickly through these, but remember they are in the slide deck. Download it and you can get all the additional details on your own. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. This is how to trigger with an inReach Mini and how to cancel. Very straightforward. The same with an Explorer Plus or an SE Plus. Straightforward. This GPS Map 66i Montana Alpha. Same process, really the same process with all 3 of the devices. Open the door, press and hold the button, wait for the 20-second countdown timer, and then if you don't accomplish anything else with the device, you've done the most important thing. You've notified Emily's team how to cancel. This is the EARTHMATE app, and we're going to see the Explorer app. We covered this slide, see the message, hit send, wait for the 20-second countdown. Canceling is a little button up in the corner. People who are canceling, we assume, are in a more calmed state and can use the interface. Explorer app, slide, see the countdown timer, same idea. These are slides on what it looks like in a companion app. So, on a paired device. So this is a Phoenix watch, and you see how to initiate an SOS. You get some prompts, and you still get a countdown timer and that sort of thing. And how to cancel, same process. One of your menu options is cancel SOS. This is the Instinct watch, slightly different, but still one of our popular outdoor wearables. How to send and cancel. The Edge cycle computer for our mountain bikers and road riders out there, you can declare and cancel with the Edge. Again, download the slide deck if you want to see more details on that. Some additional resources for everyone. We're all familiar with the Garmin Explore website. That's where you manage your account, explorer.garmin.com. go to the Garmin support site, support.garmin.com. That's where you can view all of the documentation that our support team, that our technical publication team creates, marketing videos that teach you how to use the system, all of these wonderful inReach field experience webinars that Emily and I have worked so hard on. You can see those, download them from the support site. And my favorite part, the Garmin blog, that is where you can go and read the stories from users like yourselves who have shared their adventures as well as their SOS stories, and that is www.garmin.com/blog.